Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so have you ever been called, weird, awkward, or maybe just a little too intense? Well, what if I told you that the very things society points at as your biggest flaws might actually be scientifically backed indicators of a highly intelligent mind? It's true. Today, we're completely reframing what it means to be misunderstood. We're going to look at the fascinating psychology behind why the smartest people out there often feel like they just don't fit in. And as you'll see, what looks like a totally weird quirk to the outside world is actually an incredibly efficient internal system. Let's get right into it. Here's our roadmap for today. We're covering 5 key areas. First, the high intelligence curse. Second, why smart minds hide online. Third, the truth about friendship. Fourth, traps of low intelligence. And finally, the cost of early maturity. All right, starting with number 1, the high intelligence curse, or the burden of a restless mind. Society absolutely loves to label things like social awkwardness as some kind of personal failure. But really, why do the sharpest people usually feel the most out of place? Well, think of it this way. Socializing is kind of like acting in a play where literally everyone else got the script and you didn't. When someone casually asks, "Hey, how's it going?" instead of a quick "good," your brain hits pause. You start overthinking, and suddenly you accidentally deliver a 3-minute monologue about your entire week. Psychologists actually attribute this to what's called divergent thinking. Basically, your brain is just juggling so many unusual, complex connections at once that it kind of forgets to play by the standard, boring rules of eye contact, timing, and tone. So, what looks like a quirky habit on the surface is actually a highly efficient internal system at work. Take eating the exact same meal every single day. Sure, it looks boring to outsiders, but you're actually eliminating low-impact choices to avoid decision fatigue. You're literally saving your mental energy for the harder problems. How about staying up late for no reason? You aren't just a random insomniac. You're operating on an incredibly high cognitive bandwidth. In fact, history's brightest minds, like Darwin and Mozart, were chronic night owls. And what about apologizing to a chair when you bump into it? Come on, we've all done it. That's called anthropomorphism, and it's deeply, deeply linked to having high emotional intelligence and empathy. The really crucial point here is that highly intelligent brains absolutely refuse to settle for just good enough. They are meticulously running quality control on everything. Look, most people can walk into a store and pick out a pair of shoes in 2 minutes flat. You, on the other hand, you're spending hours comparing prices, checking durability, and wondering if they'll still match your wardrobe 5 years from now, right? This is classic analysis paralysis. The thing is, you aren't indecisive at all. You just decide slowly and carefully, exploring way more angles than anyone ever actually asked for. Now, this whole mindset can lead to the ultimate procrastination. Just take a look at that number, 16. That is exactly how many years it took Leonardo da Vinci to finish the Mona Lisa. Yep, 16 years. You see, brilliant minds often need immense pressure to finally shut out the noise and enter hyper-focus. They aren't avoiding the work. Actually, scratch that. They might be avoiding it a little bit, but mostly they are just waiting for the absolute perfect conditions to strike. I absolutely love how Douglas Adams put it. I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they fly by. It's so true. Some of the brightest minds use this exact chaotic energy as mental jet fuel. They basically wait for the perfect storm of sheer panic to summon their absolute best, most creative ideas. It's like a superpower fueled by stress. All right, moving on to section 2, why smart minds hide online, the strategic psychology of digital invisibility. So have you ever noticed that some of the sharpest people you know post absolutely nothing online? Like no selfies, 0 life updates. Why on earth do they stay completely off the grid? Well, in a modern world that constantly rewards begging for attention, choosing to stay invisible isn't antisocial. No way. It's actually a massive indicator of deep self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Intelligent people just see right through the digital illusion. They intuitively understand what psychologists call social comparison theory. Basically, it's a trap where people are constantly measuring their real, messy lives against the completely fabricated highlight reels of everybody else. Smart minds possess high critical thinking. They look at a feed and ask, okay, what is the actual evidence here? And then they actively choose to protect their peace rather than participate in that toxic, endless cycle of comparison. It really comes down to a clear divide. We're talking external validation versus an internal locus of evaluation. Sharp minds, they simply don't need the internet's applause because their confidence is securely anchored from within. They don't need to post a perfectly filtered photo just to prove to the world they had a good time. They judge their success and their worth entirely by their own internal standards. It's a total game changer. Let's slide into section 3, the truth about friendship and why loners aren't actually lonely. You'll find that people with very few friends often share these surprisingly rare traits. First, they overanalyze social interactions, literally picking apart every single word that was said. They also have a zero-tolerance policy for fake performative behavior. None of that. They are deeply self-reliant, meaning they regulate their emotions internally instead of leaning heavily on a big group. Plus, they have extremely low social conformity, which basically means they aren't going to fake laugh at a terrible joke just because everyone else is. Listen, these people are not broken. Their advanced social perception simply makes them allergic to inauthenticity. They automatically filter out anything that isn't 100% genuine. It boils down to this: your mind simply values truth way more than it values belonging. You filter, you hold back, and you patiently wait for that rare connection that actually sparks. Because honestly, sitting alone feels far, far less lonely than sitting in a crowded room where absolutely nobody is saying anything real. Which brings us to section 4, traps of low intelligence, the danger of the herd mentality. Okay, so intelligent minds have what psychologists call a high need for cognition. They literally hunger for deep, effortful thought. And that makes small talk about the weather or complaining about traffic feel like empty calories. If you're trapped in a circle endlessly discussing highway construction, your mind literally feels like it's starving. Lower intelligence, on the other hand, totally thrives on this surface-level chatter and rarely pushes past it to explore deeper, unscripted concepts or theories. Now, I guarantee you'll recognize this next concept, the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's a cognitive bias where the people who know the absolute least confidently act as if they know the most. You've seen this, right? It's the people who talk the loudest, interrupt constantly, and mask their total lack of substance with pure, baseless confidence. Meanwhile, the truly sharp minds in the room are just sitting there quietly analyzing the whole situation. Let's look at some super common, totally normalized red flags. Magical thinking, for example, like genuinely believing your lucky socks helped you pass a test, that just skips critical thinking entirely. Or chronic sleep neglect. Bragging about running on 4 hours of sleep is not a badge of honor, guys. It's just self-sabotage that destroys your memory. And how about blindly forcing IKEA instructions that clearly don't make any sense? That just shows a total lack of mental flexibility. From that kind of rigid thinking to seeking instant gratification through mindless doom scrolling, these habits reveal a brain that actively avoids the heavy lifting of critical thought. All right, our final stop, section 5, the cost of early maturity and the emotional roots of the fiercely independent mind. A lot of this actually traces back to something called parentification. This is when a kid is expected to manage adult emotions or heavy responsibilities long before they are developmentally ready. They learn how to stay calm, solve problems, and act mature. But they also learn that their own feelings, well, those have to come last. It perfectly explains why some people develop this hyper self-awareness and split maturity. They learned responsibility way before they ever learned safety. Just look at how this timeline plays out. From a really young age, like 5 to 10, personal needs are totally suppressed to manage adult emotions. Then, by adolescence, an extreme, purely survival-based independence takes over. But in adulthood, it leads to this strange phenomenon called uneasy rest. Basically, a nervous system that adapted to early childhood stress never fully powers down. So when things are finally calm and safe, the brain still feels like it's in danger. It literally turns the simple act of resting into a feeling of intense guilt or anxiety. Wild, right? So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Looking back at everything we've covered in this explainer today, what if the behaviors society quickly writes off as strange are actually the ultimate proof of your psychological strength? Think about it. Perhaps your awkwardness, your absolute need for solitude, your relentless overthinking, and your refusal to just blindly follow the herd, maybe they aren't flaws to be fixed at all. Maybe they are the exact, beautifully complex traits that make your mind truly brilliant. Thank you so much for learning with me today. Keep asking those hard questions, keep protecting your peace, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.